we started finding with the seal, this lead seal that they put over, there was the stamp of the factory as well. In this case was Porto wine. It is funny how difficult sometimes is to give something to someone. It is your production from 150 years ago or a little bit more. It was found in a shipwreck.
So much marketing.
It was in Mozambique. It still have the content inside. Come on, there's so many interesting things that you could grab from this find. Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will be talking about the very interesting find of several bottles of gin, wine and sparkling wine, still with the content inside. So let's dive into it. The story of this very interesting wreck started in 2002 in the island of Mozambique. We were working there exploring another shipwreck and we noticed that in the streets there were some stoneware bottles that people in the island were selling to tourists, these stoneware bottles, which were obviously coming from a marine environment because you could still see in the bottle these little barnacles and little corals, you know, the sea growth that the objects which are in the water for a long time they get. So it was interesting because one bottle could be a find, you know.
Yeah, surprise, a coincidence. Just one bottle could be like, oh, okay,
one bottle can be, you know, like these finds you make and they don't represent anything. Could have been pertaining to a house and it was broken or it was not in use anymore and they could have thrown it to the sea. But when you see a regularity of these finds showing up in the island and being sold to tourists, you said, okay, they're coming from somewhere where there is more than one. We talked to the fishermen, they agreed in showing us the place where they found these bottles, and we went there to explore. It is a very, I said since the very beginning, this was a very interesting wreck because, for instance, the first inspection of the site, it was completely covered by sand, very clean and white sand, but you could see few of these bottles scattered in the seabed. Few of these bottles already with all this sea growth that I mentioned, but you couldn't see any wreck or big amount of wreck material. But it was in the calm side of the island, so in the north coast of the island. In that place in Mozambique, the predominant winds and the very strong winds are coming always from the south. So the north coast of the island is actually an anchorage. It's a very calm place where the ships go and anchor there because there are good conditions for that. And that wreck was there. So it makes us also think afterwards that it may have sunk when it was on anchor. It could have been on anchor in the bay, in the normal trade with the island people, and it got a leak or something and then it sunk.
And so close to the coast, could it not have been simply that people threw away the bottles off board, like nothing, that there was no shipwreck at all?
That could have been. That was one of the first things we thought because in the beginning we didn't see anything of a wreck. And yes, being an anchorage is quite common that you anchor your ship and there is a lot of discarded material from the ships. And this, when you're working in harbors, in bays, in places where it gets you very confused. It is difficult to identify what is really a wreck or what is just rubbish or what they considered rubbish at the time. See that today are precious archaeological artifacts.
For us, none of that is rubbish, but for them it was rubbish.
In the very beginning, we were investigating if that was actually a wreck site. And yes, it was, but the depth of the site was about 12 meters, which is not that shallow, but it's not that deep. So being in the calm side of the island, we always assume, okay, this ship should have been totally salvaged because it couldn't be easier. It was there, calm waters in front of the island. Anything that the ship would have brought, it would be of use for the island inhabitants or for the merchants or for everyone. So they should have rescued the wreck. Well, you excavate excavated this wreck from 2006 onwards. During 2 or 3 years, we didn't excavate it at once because we call it a bad weather wreck. But exactly because of the contrary, because we were working in different wrecks and we had that as a spare wreck, which was in a good condition. If you have to go away from another wreck because the weather becomes very rough, you always had this
Bad weather wreck.
Exactly.
Yeah, the substitution.
So we call it the bad weather wreck because it has good weather always. But not good weather, but good conditions in the sea to dive. Also, as it was a little bit deep, like 12 meters, it make it easier to dive even if there were a little bit rough conditions, which in that place there were almost never. But because of the depth, you don't get too much of a surge under the water. So we started excavating the wreck, removing this sand with our water dredge, and immediately we realized that first, yes, it was a ship. Large part of the ship is still visible, the wood, part of the wood structure, and some of the elements of the wrecks were still visible, like a big steel box that we assume it would have been like a freshwater tank of the ship. And as soon as we started removing the sediment, we started making very curious finds. And this is why I like this wreck so much. The first, let's say, outstanding find we made in that wreck was in the very first days of excavation, was an octant. An octant, it's a navigation instrument which predates the sextant that is still used today, but it's made of wood and with the scales in copper. It is very unusual to find octants or sextants from such long time ago. The wood survives. They normally rot away and you lose the instruments as it is. But in this case, the octant was in quite good conditions, which allowed us, first of all, to conserve a very nice artifact, and second, to start getting some idea about the date of the wreck. Because so far we haven't found a large amount of stoneware bottles or anything. So we found the octant. Obviously, the wreck became a little bit more interesting for us. So we decided to continue excavating and take some measures for when we stop excavating the wreck and we go another wreck, that it doesn't fill up that fast with the sediment, because that happens again and you have to excavate again the same place. So we start finding a lot of domestic items, like tableware made of this Wedgwood ceramics that I have talked already in the Cayo Paraíso episode, that made in England, mid 18th century. It is a very peculiar ceramic, very easy to identify. We found there also quite some medical items, medicine flasks, this glass flask, with very interesting because they have this lid. The
lid is kind of like a apothecary bottle.
Yes, but the stopper had this, I think it's called grind glass. It's a glass which is porous.
Yeah, that glass that it's a little bit like worked.
Yes, but in the stopper, it's like it's not smooth, so it really closed well in the mouth of the bottle. And so good it closed that many of these little bottles has the content inside. They still have air inside the bottle together with the liquid that they brought. So it was super interesting finding all this variety of artifacts.
To create a vacuum. The porousness is to create a vacuum, probably, so when the glass gives in, no air comes in and out, I assume.
Yeah, but I was trying to remember the name of that.
I don't know either.
In Spanish, it's vidrio esmerilado. In English, I use it, but
I will Google it and put it in the notes in the edit.
Help me out there. So we were very excited doing all these findings in the wreck, and then we started finding a large amount of bottles. And we will make a distinction here. The stoneware bottles that were the ones that we saw first in the island, they were, let's say, the regular wine bottles that that we still use today in the same shape, almost in the same shape, and also the bottles which are used normally for sparkling wine. These ones which are fatter on the knees and with a long neck. Okay, so we found the three types of bottles, but still in crates. Some of them were still in crates in the way that they put them in the ship. And let's say that we assume that probably the largest part of the cargo of that ship would have been saved, would have been salvaged at the time. So it was a very unexpected find, and it was very interesting because also we had the chance to study how they were packed, how they were stored in the ship. Even the maker of those, in the case of the stoneware bottles, the crates still conserve the stamp in the wood, the stamp of the house, the brewery, Schiedam, Hutman, Schiedam. Actually, I contacted them because they still exist in Germany.
Of course they do.
Of
course. I'm somewhat not surprised. I think all the beers are from like 1708 and the company still exists.
They do exist. I contacted them. I wanted to donate some of these bottles for their museum, but they were not interested. So
they didn't care.
They were not. But we started, it is curious because we realized that when we found these crates that we should take pictures and make drawings and record all the data we could from these boxes because it was impossible to take them out. The wood was already so fragile and inside was full of bottles which were sealed and with their content, so it was very heavy. You couldn't move. Even the stamp of the brewery, we had to make a photo under the water because if you take this out of the water, it would just disappear in 2 hours. So we started finding these crates and we realized that most of the bottles were sealed with the content inside. In the case of the stoneware gin bottles, they were another kind of gin bottles which are very beautiful, which are the case gin bottles. They are called like that because they are like rectangular, made of glass. The other ones are stoneware, but these ones are made of glass and they are quite fragile, so it's not that common to find them in the wrecks in good condition because normally they would break. So we were happy of finding some of these case gin bottles. And also the bottles of wine, the normal wine, we started finding with the seal, this lead seal that they put over, lead or aluminum, but the lead seal that they put over the cork. And in the lead, there was the stamp of the factory as well. In this case was Porto wine. And the house still exists as well. Same luck. We contacted them. They were very happy for the first email and then they didn't reply again. It is funny how difficult sometimes is to give something to someone. I didn't want to sell it. I wanted to donate it to them.
I agree with you. It's always very funny to see how people are not excited to get free stuff. You would think that they would be, or they would find it as touching or as interesting as you. Like, hey, I just found something that you guys made in I don't know when, and I'm trying to give like a memento, like a souvenir, and you guys don't care?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
like, I would have felt the same.
But it had also all the ingredients. It is your production from 150 years ago or a little bit more. It was found in a shipwreck.
So much marketing.
It was in Mozambique. It still have the content inside. Come on, there's so many interesting things that you could grab from this find that I was a little bit puzzled that they didn't react. But okay, we started excavating all these bottles, and obviously the same that you are thinking, we were thinking, can we drink what is inside the bottles? Because everyone says, okay, wine of 150 years, it should be super good. All right, we'll talk about that later in the episode. We continue, we excavated these bottles, these crates of bottle, which for us was also a first time that we found this kind of objects still in crates. And the excavation of the wreck continue. We have to remove a lot of sand because the area, because of being calm, is an area where the sediment deposition is very fast. So there is a lot of sand, a little bit muddy, but it's mainly sand. And this also helps the conservation of the artifacts of the wreck, because when this so thick,
protected,
this so thick sand creates an anaerobic environment underneath, so there is no oxygen and there is little microorganism growth. In general, the objects and mainly the organic materials, they will last a little bit longer. There, for instance, we found a very strange cargo of elephant hairs. Yeah, that's exactly what it is, elephant hairs.
Do you know what they are for, or by now, or what they were used for? No idea.
I made some research on it, but I couldn't come up with an answer that satisfied me. Obviously, they were interesting for sailors. They may have some, I don't know, legends around them or whatever. Because normally you expect to find tusks because of the ivory. Ivory was valuable, but hairs, and there was a lot. I mean, there was a cargo of hairs. It's not like a little bunch of hairs that you found in one place.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, nobody dropped their elephant hairs in
no. It was in some part of the ship. It was carpeted with this. So they survived because of these anaerobic conditions I mentioned. Then we also found, because then it started the enigma around the ship. We didn't know what ship it was. We had already put it somewhere in the mid 1800s because of the type of ceramics, this Wedgwood ceramics, and the type of bottles and the houses of the bottles, the producer, the makers of those bottles. So we started pinpointing the date around 1850, yeah, 1850. We also found quite some objects belonging to military uniform and equipment, like a sword handle made of copper, the belt buckle, and fragment of a scabbard of a sword, which all bear the emblem of the British Royal Navy. So we started thinking, okay, we have here English ceramics, the Wedgwood ceramics, they were from England. We have Royal Navy military stuff, uniforms and part of weaponry, but we also have Dutch gin bottles, we have German gin bottles, we have Portuguese port wine, and the sparkling wine we never found out where it came from. It could have come from any of these three countries or a fourth one, but
from Italy, Prosecco, I don't know.
but we already had like 5 nationalities because of the artifacts that you were finding.
Yeah.
And then there are 2 finds that really make me scratch my head. I haven't stopped yet scratching my head about it. First is a chronograph. It's like a pocket watch, but for a reason I never found out, they call it a chronograph in English. And it was made by Robert Roscoe, a known maker of watches, and it has a serial number. And that's very good because with the serial number, you are able to more or less find out which was the date in which was made. But it was also inscribed and said meio cronómetro. So it's like half chronometer, but meio is in Portuguese. And the way, I mean, Roscoe is English. Meio is the word for half in Portuguese, and cronómetro is in no language, because chronometro in Portuguese is without an H, chronometer in English is with an H, but not with the O. So it was a total misspelling, very beautifully written, but it was a total misspelling in every language. So we never know what it was. And why Robert Roscoe did something so weird. Maybe he was trying his Portuguese and couldn't his watch, you know.
He had a Portuguese girlfriend at the time, and he was like, okay, let's make this one.
And also we found a measuring cup, apparently for pharmacy, the ones that you use in pharmacy to measure volumes of liquid, which it has also inscribed, that was of glass, made of glass, meta onça. Onça with this funny C of the Portuguese. What is?
Cedilha.
Yeah, cedilha in Portuguese, but in English?
They don't.
Yeah, it's the.
I know it in French because they don't have it in English.
Okay. It's the funny C then. And then again, you have these Portuguese language written things. Okay, in Mozambique, they were probably trading with the Portuguese settlement in the island of Mozambique, and they had already that on board. But that put us in a span of like 5 or 6 countries, which you see them represented in the sample of artifacts that you are taking out of the water. It was really, really interesting from the structural point of view of the ship. There is, because this was obviously a wreck with a lot of unusual finds. We found the rudder of the ship. This, you almost never find the rudder of the ship. You can find the rudder pintles or the rudder gudgeons, but the blade itself, the wood that makes the rudder itself, you almost never find it. Known reasons, and also because most of the ships that strand, the first thing they lose is the rudder, because the rudder hits the ground first, get dislocked and lost, and it floats and goes away. Here we found the complete rudder of the ship. Also make me think that the ship sank when it was an anchor. It was not an accident. It was just quietly sitting there, and something happened and went down. And we were able to study and to record the sheeting, the copper sheeting around the rudder that we all knew from books and from publications, but we haven't seen it in the object itself. Well, that one was still completely covered, intact, a beautiful piece. I think we can show some footage about it because I took some footage about it. So this wreck gave us a lot of interesting finds and very recognizable objects. These objects that still, when you're diving and you find a bottle with the content inside, it really takes you to something very familiar. Everyone has seen bottles and how they look with things inside, and you don't expect to find them in the shipwrecks. It's not that common that this would happen. So we were all very happy with our bottles, obviously. Then it came the question, could we drink this? Let's try it, because someone tried to pull up an archaeological reason to try to drink the 150-year-old wine, but it was just curiosity. People wanted to. But we didn't have to try, and I am telling you, for any of you that have the same idea and have the luck of finding wine or any spirit that has been under the sea for so many years, be double careful. This is not something you want to drink. And we didn't have even to try, because when we took these bottles out of the water, we put them in the conservation center to start with the conservation process. Some of them change of temperature, some of them started, the corks were just popping up. It was crazy that you were working in the lab and suddenly you were pah! And immediately afterwards it came the smell.
Exactly. That is 101 not to drink this. If the drink is doing things by itself, then maybe don't.
Exactly. If it had some free will, you should not drink it.
Yeah.
But okay, it was very interesting for us to come across all this variety of artifacts from the mid-19th century. We are talking about, we have estimated the wreck to be around 1850. But, and this is one of the beauties of research, we excavated that wreck in 2006. And a few weeks ago, meaning 18 years later, I got a communication from a German researcher that he have seen my publication about this. I will put the publication link in the comment section so you can go deeper into what I'm saying, because there is plenty of other artifacts and other marks, and you can check it there if you are interested. And he was reading my publication and he spotted one of the bottles that has a certain mark in the stoneware bottle, in the paste. It has a certain mark of a factory that only came active after 1860, meaning that my estimation of 1850 was already off, for 10 years. And then again, that's why I love this activity so much, because it's a blessing 18 years later that someone can come and collaborate and, you know, provide this kind of information that I didn't have. And he, being a specialist in this field, he saw it and said, well, it cannot be 1850, because by 1850, this factory was not producing this gin yet.
Yeah.
So I wanted to tell you this story. I may eventually make another episode on this wreck, because there are plenty of very interesting artifacts that I didn't discuss here, and the ones that I touched, it was quite superficial, because otherwise it will be a never-ending video. So I wanted to tell you this story and answer your potential question if you can drink these things when you find them in a wreck site. The answer from my experience is no. Don't try to do it. If you came this far into the video, please give me a like, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done it yet, and let's keep on diving.